Welcome back to Season 3 of the 007 Files. I'm co-host Hobby Trujillo, and I am once again joined by fellow agents David Leigh and Bill Koenig. Say hello, gentlemen.
Hello, gentlemen.
Hi, everyone.
So we're going to play a little catch-up on today's episode and talk about some bits and bobs. Bill, you wanted to lead off with a postscript to our two-part Thunderball 60th anniversary conversation that we had over the last two episodes.
Yes, as we record this in middle of September, it's also the 60th anniversary of 3 spy shows that debuted in the U.S. I Spy on September 15th, The Wild Wild West on September 17th, and Get Smart on September 18th. All were greenlit because of the interest in spies that was generated by Bond, but each of them had their own touches. I Spy was relatively grounded. The Wild Wild West was pretty outlandish, and Get Smart was out-and-out parody and comedy. And they all had their impact. They all had their fans. It's just another sign of just the cultural impact Thunderball was having at the time. So that's all I wanted to say.
Did you have a favorite of those 3 shows?
Well, I liked them all a lot. They just all have something different. You know, I Spy, like I said, was more grounded. It was more real world like. It also was socially important because you had a white man and a black man as equal partners. The Wild Wild West was like a pulp magazine come to life, and it's just it's set in the 1870s. It's just, you know, they went, I mean, one episode you had scientists whose brain had been extracted from their bodies. And then Get Smart was very funny. And, you know, it originated with some executive said, hey, James Bond's popular. Hey, Inspector Clouseau's popular. Let's like combine those two concepts. And it was up to Mel Brooks and Buck Henry to actually turn this into a workable pilot script. And anyway, but I Spy ran 3 seasons, Wild Wild West ran 4, and Get Smart ran 5. And they made a lot more episodes in those days. So, you know, they all...
Yeah, considerably.
All have... I mean, I'm a fan of all 3, and they're intense fans for each one. So, yeah, it's funny. We were talking about Thunderball's 60th, but there are other 60th anniversaries happening right now. So,
and all of those wound up having movies and big, well, Get Smart had a theatrical movie, but they all had like modern Hollywood, modern being, you know, relatively speaking, Hollywood adaptations in the early 2000s. All 3 of those movies.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they don't have the longevity of Bond, but they certainly have kind of stuck around to various degrees of success.
And also the more successful ones that followed Bond's path, while they got their energy from Bond, or Bond made them possible, they each had their own takes and their own unique visions. So I've seen some Bond fans, oh, they're just ripoffs. Well, no, they're not just ripoffs. And again, it depends on what you're into and so forth.
Yeah,
but
I would tend to think they're more inspired by than ripping off, per se.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Switching gears, have either of you ordered your La La Land Thunderball CDs yet?
I need to.
Got to get on that. I think the email I had the other day said it was preparing to ship. So I'm excited to have that to wrap up our Thunderball conversation.
Yes, the original announcement said they would be shipping by the end of September.
And I was listening to Music of Bond, and they mentioned there's a limited edition 500 copies XLP Blue and Orange Casino Royale 1967 vinyl soundtrack from Quartet Records, which is basically just a reissue of their 2019 release, just different colorways. And the notes on their website says it's long been considered a cornerstone of an audiophile's collection. Lauded by the absolute sound, the original Call Gems release continues to remain in pole position as the best sounding, quote, popular LP vinyl disc of all time. I don't have any version of this soundtrack in my collection. I've come across the 2019 reissue, I guess, once or twice. It was like $50. But I was curious if either of you own a version of the soundtrack, and whether or not you do, what you think of the music from that film.
I own a version. I think it's like somebody made it on their own. And this particular version had the tracks in order of the film. Okay. And then it had the original soundtrack album order. So you got both versions. And
So kind of like what La La Land does.
yeah, exactly. To be honest, I think the soundtrack is probably the best thing about the movie. And also, for trivia's sake, the song "The Look of Love" was the first James Bond related song to be nominated for Best Song in the Oscars. It did not win, but it did get nominated. Dusty Springfield sang it, and well, as I said, it's the best thing about that movie, and it's quite enjoyable to listen to.
I do not have a copy, so I am going to pass on any comments.
Okay. Yeah, I would have to probably agree with Bill then that probably is the best thing about that movie. And touching back on our earlier episode, that version of Casino Royale does factor heavily into influence for the Austin Powers series, even having The Look of Love in the first movie, and then they have Burt Bacharach show up and do a song in the second movie. He's just on the street corner. He and Elvis Costello start playing a song for Austin Powers to dance to, so with Felicity Shagwell. So there's lots of 67 Casino Royale influence also baked into that franchise. So
I've got to say there is something else which is good about that film, and that is the poster. It's kind of a classic.
That's Robert McGinnis, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is.
I think it is. The silhouette.
Yeah, it's like a silhouette with a body full of tattoos. I mean, that's kind of that's how I think of it. Anyway,
yeah, but it's brilliant. I'm not sure who did it, but it's certainly in that style.
Hey, look at that! 2 good things came out of Casino Royale '67. And when when my kids were growing up and we were watching all the Bond movies every other weekend, like that was one we skipped. I'm like, I can't do this to you guys. I think the last time I saw it would have been 12 years ago, and that was enough. So. Was it last week? We got over 30 minutes of gameplay revealed at the PlayStation State of Play demo of 007 First Light and a new trailer. The game's release has been revealed as 27 March 2026, and there are 3 editions across platforms: Standard, Specialist, and Legacy. Standard will be, of course, your base game. If you have the digital version, you'll have a 24-hour early access, and pre-ordering gets you a free deluxe upgrade, which has 4 exclusive outfits, a new weapon skin, and a gleaming pack. The Specialist Edition is Amazon only. It's a physical edition only. You get all the aforementioned things, plus a classic tuxedo skin, which is irking people because the Legacy Edition, which is also physical, has all the stuff that the standard version has, but then it also throws in a Golden Gun figurine, which looks like a reproduction of the weapon. I'm not sure the scale yet. An obsidian gold suit and gold gun weapon skin, and it comes in a steelbook, which has like a removable 007 magnet from it. And the main complaint that people are having is the Legacy Edition doesn't have the classic tuxedo skin from the Specialist. And why would you not include a classic tuxedo for a Bond game? So, and that goes for $200, I think, if I'm remembering right. The regular base game is $70. Gentlemen, what did you watch of those 2 things, and what did you think of what you saw?
I watched part of the preview on YouTube. The action seems to flow pretty well. I know that the storyline is this is a young Bond. In fact, on social media, I saw today someone said, well, I was ready for a Bond younger than me, but I wasn't ready for an M younger than me. It really does seem to be trying to be its own thing, which I think is good, and not copy. It evokes Bond movies, but as I said, it's its own thing. So I'm not a gamer, but it looks fairly impressive to my eye. I'm more interested in, like, will this help bring in younger fans or create new fans the way the GoldenEye video game did, 30 years ago? That remains to be seen, but at the very least, it does seem to be an impressive effort in terms of the graphics, in terms of the flow, and so forth.
Yeah, I watched some of it, but not very much. And I skipped through the length of the 30 minutes to see if there was anything worth watching, because I think it starts out with just a car driving along and a conversation that you're listening to which
Yeah.
to me isn't very interesting at all. And I'm not that interested in the game because I'm not going to be able to play the game.
That's fair.
I've said before that I've never been a massive gamer. I did get the Quantum of Solace and what was the other game called now? I don't remember it. The one that came after that. Bloodstone.
There was Bloodstone, and then Legends came out when Skyfall did.
So I had the Quantum of Solace and the Bloodstone games, which I did enjoy, but my age is catching up on me, and both of my wrists are absolutely wrecked. I can't play games anymore. It's simple as that. So I would be up for it if I could, but because I'm not going to be able to, I'm not that interested in the game. And that doesn't mean to say I think that other people shouldn't enjoy it. They absolutely should. And like Bill, I am interested to see if it brings in new Bond fans.
I feel you on the risk comments because I've been, playing Indiana Jones on the PS5, and you can turn it off, but there these haptic controls. So there's like pressure in the controller now, like there's resistance when you do things. And I've noticed that, on prolonged gaming, my hands do tend to get a little cramped and tired, and, the muscles start to ache if you're doing a lot of stuff frequently. But yeah, I think the way it started off with that long car drive, like that, it doesn't necessarily leap you in to, what the gameplay is, but it sets up a nice tone of what the visuals are and the scope that it has. And as it goes along, like you get to see lots of familiar to both Bond games and Hitman games of like the different options you have for carrying out your mission. Like there's not a specific one way to do things, which is what's really refreshing about it. And I think that's going to help draw in like the younger crowd, people younger than us, which I just checked. Fortunately, I'm still younger than them, but not by much. And
okay.
Yeah. And that actress was actually in No Time to Die. So there's a nice bit of connection there with like the films. She was in the MI6 lab where they were making Heracles. And she and her friend were making fun of the guy with the sandwich where they wrote like, what was it? Botulism or...
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I know the bit you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. She gets executed like 5 minutes after she shows up, but she was in a Bond movie, so it's nice to have some kind of connection because the previous games did have, Judi Dench, which I still can't believe how many games she was a part of, and even, Pierce and Daniel Craig. So it's nice to have that. And, it seems like they have a solid cast, and the action looks really good, feels big and epic. Like there's a chase after an airplane that you have to get on, and then there's a fight, and then you fall out of the airplane and you're skydiving, and that's kind of where it ends until it gets into some of the other like alternate missions you can do. And it looks like a lot of fun, and it's certainly been a long time in coming. And we've talked about these long gaps and these delays and how it's such a crowded marketplace. And, I think this is a good way to keep the IP out there and to get it in front of a younger generation where they can see. And it pains me to say this, but, Casino Royale is going to be 20 next year. And there's a whole lot of people that's all they know of Bond, maybe. And this is a way to bring in newer people and get them excited again, and to see some of the different sides maybe that they didn't see in the Craig films, although this does feel a lot like Casino Royale since we are a young Bond starting off. But I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully it does have that GoldenEye effect, because that was a pretty huge part of my rebirth as a Bond fan, and I definitely remember it drawing in a lot of other people that weren't necessarily into Bond, but everyone loved playing multiplayer on that.
One more note about Judi Dench. Not only was she part of video games, she was part of an amusement park attraction. I went on it in the 1990s at the Kings Island amusement park outside of Cincinnati, Ohio. And you go in and you sit down, and this display comes on, and Judi Dench talks to the people attending, and various things happen. You can feel your seat shake and stuff. Yeah, she was part of that. I have no idea if this is still at the park or not. I haven't gone to an amusement park in decades. Yeah, she was part of that.
I'm sorry, was it Bond related?
Yeah,
The park?
Yeah.
Okay.
The attraction was, yeah. I mean, it was Kings Island's a general amusement park with roller coasters and so forth, but this one attraction was, James Bond themed, and like you said, you had Judi Dench playing as part of it. I wrote about the time for a website. I have to see if I can find that, but yeah.
And it's similar to like Patrick Stewart lent his voice to some PlayStation 2 X-Men video games. It always is amusing to me to see these, you think of these classic British actors, and lending their voices to like a video game. Like it just, back then it wasn't that common. It was kind of mind blowing to me, especially if you think of that era where like nowadays everything is prestige TV, but there was a time where like movie actors were movie actors and TV actors were TV actors. And you hoped if you were a TV actor, you could make the jump to the big screen. But it was like you were slumming if you went from movies to television. And, I think in the early 2000s that slowly started to change. And now you get, people like Harrison Ford doing television shows who just got his first Emmy nomination at 83 years old. So,
I didn't know that. What's that for? What's that for?
For Shrinking, it's on Apple TV, so it's a subscription service. But he plays the head of a psychiatrist's office, and he has Parkinson's. It's a comedy with a lot of emotional drama to it as well. It's a really good show. It's worth, getting the trial for and binging it really quick because they have 2 seasons out right now, and they finished filming a 3rd. But it's worth checking out. Lastly, speaking of streaming TV shows, I wanted to talk about 007 Road to a Million Season 2. They dropped the entirety of their 2nd series on the 22nd of August. And once again, the contestants were in pairs. We had father and son Dylan and Dan, sisters Kat and Maya, brother and sister Assad and Jamila. We had 2 pairs of best friends, Ricky and Nadi, and Sam and Luke. And then we had 3 married couples, Stephen and Shelley, Rob and Alex, and Shabina and Sid. Of course, Brian Cox was back in as the controller, but he didn't feel as Bond villainish in this season. He felt more like the head of MI6, and he had a control room, and he had a woman kind of like his modern money penny helping him with information. So before we get into any finer details, briefly tell me about how you watched it this year. Did you watch it all first day? Did you space it out? Did you watch it with a partner?
Well, I was quite late to it just because I was enjoying my summer holidays, and so I wasn't rushing to it. But when we did sit down to it, I sat down with my wife to watch it, and we watched it. We watched the first 2 episodes, then perhaps another 2 episodes like 5 days later, and 2 more episodes, and then last night we watched 1 episode. So I've only got 1 episode to go until I know who the winner is. But yeah, to answer the question, we've been doing it at home as a couple.
I also watched it with my wife. She's more into reality shows than I am. When the first season of 007 Road to a Million aired, she wanted to see it. I didn't necessarily, but if she was going to see it, then I might as well watch it with her. So that's pretty much how we watched this one. I wouldn't say we binge watched it. Probably saw all the episodes within a 2-week period or so. Because if I remember right, with the first season, they had like 2 episodes to begin with. And then they came out 1 a week, I think, until the end.
That's right. Yeah.
So this time, they were all there, so you could see the whole thing on your own pace, essentially. I would say it is an improvement overall from the first season. It's more integrated with Bond tropes. I do think it was a little bit offset by I was not as impressed with the contestants this time around compared with the first season, because in the first season, there were like 3 teams that caught my eye. Number one, there were these 2 nurses who had worked in war zones They were very
Beth and Jen.
sympathetic. Yeah, they were very sympathetic and very capable. And I really found myself rooting for them, despite my issues with the series overall.
Yeah.
There were also a pair
because I think they got the furthest in the season one, didn't they? They didn't actually win the million, but they tied.
They tied. There were 3
with the Bone Brothers.
The Bone Brothers, and there was, I think, one other. Anyway, but yes. Anyway, they were tied. They got £300,000. Since David hasn't seen the last episode, I don't want to say how this turns out. But one thing they do, this isn't really a spoiler, you get more into direct competition where one team is knocking others out as they go along. So it seems a more, structurally, it seems more interesting that way. But as I said, I didn't think the contestants this time were terrible, but I just wasn't as engrossed in their stories as I was the first time.
I think you're right. I think this time round, it's trying to find somebody to actually back, because I don't think there is anybody, and I think some of the contestants were quite unlikable, in fact.
Well, in fact, there was one pair, and I believe it was a single-sex married couple. And the one guy, he was boasting about how he spoke 7 languages fluently. He could get by in other languages, and he just seemed kind of insufferable at one point. So early on, he and his husband are doing this thing. It was on top of a building in Bangkok, trying to, now I can't remember exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to restore communications to this tower. And at one point, the guy that I wasn't finding terribly likable said to his husband, "I will instruct, you will comply." And I'm thinking, boy, that sounds like a James Bond villain. It's like, but then I started running the Bond movies, like, well, no, I don't think it's James Bond. I finally figured it out. He sounded almost like the villain in the 1968 pilot Hawaii Five-0.
Okay.
And he had the same cadence, not the exact quote, but very close. And it's like, no wonder this guy doesn't seem very sympathetic. And I know I don't want to say more about the outcome, but I didn't care for him.
Well, I have to wonder that, because I know who you're talking about, and I have to wonder, how they construct these reality shows and the way they edit things together, if they're making him more of a villain or, painting him in a bad light. Because, all these things are, it's filmed and it's real people, but, a lot of it is through the magic of editing. Someone does something, then they cut to someone else and it's, maybe a dirty look, but maybe that didn't happen in that scene. They just put everything together to create, a sense of drama and tension. So, well, and also I wonder how much of that was crafted in the editing, not necessarily.
And it's not
true.
Just the editing, because they go through all this raw footage. Somebody writes scripts. Somebody writes a script so that the editors can then put it together to match the script. So it's like they're called unscripted, but
yeah. No, there were definitely words spoken that felt like dialogue.
Yeah.
But we watched it, a couple of episodes at a time over the course of a week. So it went by really fast, and they're different degrees of run times. So some nights we'd watch 3 and then maybe 2 another night, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a step up from season 1, both. Like, I don't know. I really liked the contestants this year, and something I wanted to talk to you guys about was like the Bond connections, because in season 1 we did see a lot of locations from like Moonraker and from Spectre and from Skyfall, and they would use like the appropriate Bond music, but you would see like the painting from Skyfall get mentioned as a clue, but no one's talking about, oh, this is like in Skyfall. It's up to us to make that connection. And if you're just watching it, you have no clue. And in this season, they were they weren't afraid to say James Bond. And, the music continued. And of course, it had its own original score. But like when they're running around Mexico City, they're like, oh, this is like Inspector when he did this, and you have to go to this thing. And I actually felt more like they knew who James Bond was and enjoyed being part of that experience, which is something we didn't get in season 1.
Well, there were, in one scene in the new show, I guess they're best friends. They're driving. It's supposed to be DB5. I suspect it's probably one of the replicas that was constructed for
it
No
was one
Time
of the
to
new
Die.
ones because it had all the gadgets.
didn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And the BMW engine and the carbon fiber body and stuff. Yeah, I just real quick, all these old vintage cars from the early movies, you think, oh, that's great. That'd be great to drive them. I had a chance years ago to drive one of them. It was one of Tracy's cars from On Her Majesty's Secret Service. They had some cars that were made for Portugal, which I thought of as the summer car, and they had some different cars used for Switzerland, which I thought of as winter cars. I believe this was a summer car, but the people who restored it put skis on the back, which was odd. Anyway, it's like I drove it on a country road, far from traffic. And, it's like no power steering, no power brakes, having to like lean really hard on the brakes to get it to slow down. And, it was miserable to drive. It looks cool from the outside. And I suspect, if you drove a vintage DB5 actually made in the early 60s, it'd probably be the same thing.
No, exactly. They were renowned for being pigs to drive, I think.
Yeah.
Because automotive technology has come on, 60 years worth almost. No, not almost. 60 years worth.
60 years.
Yeah. I saw it was a 65 Mustang came up in some local selling group that had been restored and it was up for auction. And I was looking at it. I'm like, do I sell my current car for this one? And then I was thinking about it and I was like, well, the air conditioning is probably not as good. I don't have the luxury of plugging in my iPhone and because it all it had was an AM radio.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can't connect my Apple CarPlay or anything like that. And it's like there are so many things we take for granted now with like power steering, anti-lock brakes that wouldn't have been in a car like that. Definitely different engines and and the thing went for like crazy. Last time I checked, it was up to like $100,000. I'm like, nope, I'm out. What stood out to you, or what was a favorite challenge from this season, David?
Okay. Well, this is going to be a bit of a disappointment, I think, because I think everything kind of went downhill after episode 1.
Really?
But that happened to me with season 1 too. I started off quite liking it, but as I progressed through the series, I just kind of lost interest in it because I think, as a Bond fan, it is exciting to watch something that's related to Bond. And so, in a way, I'm a bit more drawn to it than Bill is because I kind of have to watch it, even though part of me feels that I shouldn't. But, the actual experience of watching it isn't really that good. It's not what I want from a Bond program. I would be much more interested in watching, for example, a documentary about somewhere that Bond visited or about the music or, something that is solidly related to the films and doesn't have some kind of spurious connection because the first episode, you got this challenge and it was it was set in Thailand and the James Bond Island featured in it, and the scenery there is fantastic, and it was kind of themed around the man with the golden gun. But the boat that they got to, it was supposed to be, I suppose, Scaramanga's sailing boat from the film, but it didn't look anything like the boat that was in the film, and so there's always this disconnect in that they're leading you towards something that actually isn't quite there when you get to it. And So, I find it a bit weird. And then there's also in another episode, I don't remember which one, and there is a scene that's clearly inspired by Skyfall, but rather than being on an uninhabited island in the middle of the Pacific or wherever it was supposed to be in Skyfall, it's in Mexico. So it pushes you in one direction, then pulls you in another.
Yeah, they kind of combined Skyfall and License to Kill with that.
Mm-hmm.
Bill, did you have any challenges that you liked or got a thrill out of seeing?
Not really. I was going to say one improvement I thought was there was more variety of Bond music in this series compared to the earlier series. The earlier series was mostly the Daniel Craig films. There was some John Barry stuff from earlier movies, but it was heavy into Daniel Craig stuff. Whereupon in the new series, I thought there was more variety. That's one of my pluses. And the thing was, in the first episode, like I said, they divided the contestants. Half went to James Bond Island, half went to downtown Bangkok. Now, downtown Bangkok doesn't really figure into the Bond movies. Thailand does with the man with the golden gun. But that didn't bother me as much as some of the other things from the first season, like Mons is an interesting location to have a challenge, but has nothing to do with James Bond.
No.
And the Eiger is very picturesque, but it has nothing to do with James Bond.
I feel like Monza was just to get the Aston Martin F1 car in the show and make that connection.
But that was at best a tangent.
Yeah, it's very tenuous.
Yeah.
And is David Arnold involved in the music for this one?
That was my big con, was that they cut out the main title sequence, which used that new arrangement he did for season 1.
Yeah.
So I forget who scored the episodes because it's in the credits, but it wasn't Arnold, and I was a little dismayed to not have that music back. I really like that one.
I wonder if that signals anything for Bond 26. No longer the house composer.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I really liked the Altasea challenge where they had to cross those wires to get to like the secret base. Like that, I've done something similar to that, but nowhere near as high. So that I found to be really scary. And I liked having the actor from Skyfall back doing the psychological profile tests with everyone. Like I thought that was a fun way to key it back to the movies and get to know the contestants a little bit better. Would you guys like to see a season 3? And if you would you, what changes would you make to it? What would improve it for you?
I think for me, the changes that they would need to make would make it impossible to make. I think in a way it is like the Kim Sherwood book that I read, that there's no point in having a James Bond novel without James Bond. And in the same way, there is no point in having a James Bond TV show unless it has James Bond in it.
Yeah, I'll wait and see if there's a third season. I'm not convinced there will be, because like last time, we knew almost immediately there was going to be season 2, and then they've been a little quiet about whether there's going to be a season 3. I don't know.
I think they've tried it and they have tried to fix the problems for season 1, but I don't think there's an appetite in the general TV watching population to watch it. Hardcore Bond fans, I will probably watch just about any old crap if it's Bond related, but that doesn't mean to say I'm going to enjoy it, and I would rather enjoy it than not. So I hope that they don't, in fact, and if they are going to make a spin-off, then I think they need to really think hard about what that spin-off is. This isn't good enough.
We should also note that the new season 2 included Bruce Fairstein. I think his title was consulting producer. This is according to an interview he did on the Spy Hards podcast. He apparently was responsible for giving the controller a bit more definition, that he's MI6, because that was one of the problems I had with the first season was, well, who is this controller? Is he a villain? What is he? he seems to be acting like a villain. But then at times, a contestant guessed wrong on the question. Oh, he seems sad. Like, hey, other times he seemed to be like, reveling in their failures. So it's like, well, what is he?
I presumed that he was a villain in the first one, and I hadn't thought about him, potentially being MI6 until Javi said at the beginning of this section. But you're quite right. He does seem much more like he's MI6 now, and on the same side. And before, he was always trying to put obstacles in their way. Now he's trying to get them through the obstacles. But I think he's much better integrated into it, because before it was all filmed after they'd done the, all the reality stuff. And he was, from what we've heard, he was very much an afterthought to try and make the whole thing hang together. But he's much better integrated. They've thought right from the start how they're going to use him, and so I think the controller works better here. But it's just the whole concept of the show isn't that good. In fact, if I go back to the 1970s when I was a kid, there used to be a show on British TV on Saturday evenings, and it was called The Master Spy, and it was clearly influenced by Bond. There was a secretary called Miss Money something or other. She wasn't Money Penny, but she was Money, I don't know, Money Spender or something like that. So, getting as close as you could get to Money Penny without actually being sued. And every week they'd have different contestants, and they'd have to do different challenges for whatever crappy prize British TV used to give out in those days. It would be I don't know, a £50 voucher for your local supermarket or something like that. I can't remember. But I used to enjoy that. Whether I'd actually enjoy it now as an adult, I'm not quite sure. But if they are going to do this kind of thing, I think I'd rather see them do... I think I'd rather see them bring back The Master Spy than do Road to 1,000,003.
Probably enjoyed this season the most out of the three of us, but I wouldn't mind. I would definitely watch a season 3 if they made it, but given how, expensive I would assume this show is to make, especially when you have like the product placement of the Aston Martins and everyone got their own special No Time to Die Seamaster and all the Bogner clothing, and just the dumping it all at once doesn't really make for a sustained conversation. And it's a very niche market to begin with, like you said, and to have it on, Amazon, which I imagine a lot of people have, but who really watches reality shows, especially one that's so specific like this? Like, I can't imagine the viewership was very high, as it does seem to kind of split the fan base on, what it is, because everyone's clamoring for Bond 26. No one's clamoring for, the next season of the show. So I'd be really surprised if they make a season 3, but I mean, I'd be there for it if they did. I doubt it would be in the cards.
No, if there's a season 3, I'll definitely watch it, but I'll hate myself a bit for it.
Well, also in the context, season 1 had commenced production, I think, before Amazon acquired MGM. But then, okay, we're not getting, from the Amazon standpoint, we're not getting a Bond film anytime soon. So let's go all in on this reality show. And whereupon, okay, season 2 comes out 2 years later, and it's like, well, they're working on a new Bond movie under Amazon proprietorship. So it's like, we started making season 2, so we got to put it on the air. We can't just write it off. Or at least I assume they felt they couldn't just write it off.
I don't feel like there was a push at all from Amazon.
No, I think there was much more of a promotional push for season 1.
Yeah, much. I got sent some promotional stuff by Amazon's PR people, but for the first season, there were bios of all the contestants, there were videos. I was sent all kinds of stuff, and this time around, it's really been toned down. Maybe that is partly explained by the change in ownership of Bond. I don't know, but certainly if what I experienced there is similar across the board, then yeah, they have not been promoting it as much at all.
Well, I think that's going to do it for today's episode. Bill, where can people find you?
Oh, I'm at the Spy Command, hmssweblog.wordpress.com. I'm on X, I'm on Blue Sky. Yeah.
And David, what about yourself?
You can find me at thejamesbonddossier.com. Just Google that and up it'll pop. And I will too with it.
Well, I am on Instagram as The Bond Is Not Enough. And I also want to remind you that we have a YouTube channel for the 007 Files where we post the audio-only versions of these episodes and also a few videos as well. I've got some recent thoughts about the topics we discussed today. So you can click on those, and if you like it, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. So thank you very much for listening. The 007 Files will return.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks for listening.